Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to 501st. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the new Tier 7 Czechoslovakian heavy tank that just entered the super test. And it is called the Skoda T45. I know this isn't the best picture of it, but this is one of the best ones I could find. This one's actually probably a bit better quality. This is the super test paper. Wargaming recently announced it is coming to the super test. So we'll see if that means that they're going to be coming out with a new line of Czechoslovakian heavies. That could be quite interesting. And also I'm going to be reviewing this thing's stats. Just remember that all of this is subject to change. Right here, characteristics are not final at the bottom. This is still going through super test, and it will probably come out to common test. Then it might finally make the game. But we'll just see what happens. Remember, this is a Tier 7, not a Tier 8, like most of the tanks that come out sooner are. And also, I prepared a spreadsheet with some of the most played Tier 7 heavies that you might meet on the battlefield that you might be brawling with. And I have it compared out with them. So let's go ahead and start just kind of looking at this real quick. So immediately you see that its gun isn't all that amazing. I've done the math, and with 9-second reload and only 220 damage a shot, you're only going to be getting about 1,500 damage per minute. It couldn't even, a little bit below that even, so it couldn't even kill itself in 1 minute if it penned every single shell. And so that's going to be a bit harsh. This gun is not looking good at all. 220, if you see that, you could be like, oh, it's probably a shorter reload tank, but then also it has quite bad armor penetration. It's only better than, all the Tier 7 heavies with the Russian gun, the big Russian gun 390 Alpha. Those are the only tanks that has better pen than, and then it has 9-second reload. So that's really going to be, it's going to make this tank really struggle when you're brawling with only the 220 damage per shot. Its dispersion at 100 meters, 0.4 isn't that great. It's not bad. It's not good for a heavy. For a tank in general at Tier 7, it's kind of on the worst side. 2.9 aim time. Yeah, you're not going to want to be trusting this gun to, if it has that bad damage per minute, that bad reload, you're not going to want to be trusting its gun handling either. So its turret traverse speed, it's kind of on the slower side, for maybe not for a heavy, but for Tier 7s, it's kind of on the slower side. 7 degrees of gun depression, it's going to be okay. 15 degrees of gun elevation, it's mediocre. It's nothing that's going to boost the tank's gun to be like that over-the-ridge fighter. That would need like 10 to 12. So 64 ammo capacity is completely fine. Also, you see that it fires heat. So that has a decent caliber gun to be firing heat. It has an 88 millimeter gun. 88 millimeter gun. So at Tier 7 it's okay, but its HE rounds aren't really going to be doing that much at Tier 7. So its gun, all in all, is kind of, let's just say it, crappy. It's not really going to get that damage per minute. It's not going to have that good aim time. It's not going to have that incredible pen. It's really just kind of an all-around below average gun for this tank. Because you could mount this on a Tier 6, or maybe even a Tier 5. This is basically the gun that is on the B1GR, whatever it is, the Tier 5 French heavy tank at Tier 5, except better pen, maybe worse tier for tier even. So this is really not that great of a gun at all. Mobility, now this is where it has okay mobility. Is it enough to make up for the awful firepower? No, it's really not. Only 30 kilometers an hour. It's not really going to be getting that fast. You can put a turbocharger on it, and you'll get that 34 or 33, whatever it is. But that's not really that much of a boost. It does have a decent reverse speed. You'll see it compared to the other tanks in just a minute. While it doesn't have the greatest horsepower engine, it's also kind of a light tank for a heavy at least. But 14 specific power, yeah, that's pretty decent. Okay, whole traverse speed, but then this is where this is like one of its only good looking spots. 1,500 HP. So I think the Tiger 1 also has 1,500 HP, but this is the base HP for all Tier 8 heavy tanks. So I mean, it'll last you a long time. That's probably another reason that it can't kill itself in 1 minute, because it has that really large health pool. It has 110 frontal armor. It's not really going to be doing you that much unless you like all the way angle it, and then you get a couple lucky bounces. Maybe against lower tiers it'll do some stuff, but also look at that humongous lower plate. This isn't looking that great for the whole armor. 160 turret armor, it's not the best, it's not the worst, but I mean, there's not that much angle. Let me take a look at the other picture that I have here. Yeah, that's not the greatest angle. Maybe if you depress your gun, it might give you a little bit of armor, but I mean, premium rounds are always going to go through the front of your turret, no matter what. They're almost always going to go through the front of your turret unless you're fighting lower tier vehicles. This turret, I'm guessing, will be quite sturdy against lower tier vehicles. And then you'll get those occasional lucky bounces if you angle. Yeah, you might not want to be relying on your turret too much. It's probably not going to do that much for you. Neither is your hull. Your turret will, if you just expose your turret and maybe get that gun depression going, if you get into some good match makes, then this thing's armor might actually be okay. But, I mean, looking at this, its gun is that's really going to hold this tank back a lot. So I'm guessing it's going to have to be kind of that faster assault heavy. I mean, but only 14 specific power. There's really not that much great stuff to say about this tank. I guess you can get into the heavy position a little bit faster, maybe play kind of like behind the rest of the heavies, get into a good sniping position, maybe use that turret armor a little bit. But also, it's the main feature of this tank, I'm probably going to have to say, is these 1,500 hit points. So it's kind of like a higher tier TOG maybe. You don't really have the armor that really does that much. It'll get the occasional lucky bounces like the TOG, but those hit points are really going to have to keep you alive. So, I don't know. Let's see this tank compared to some of the other tier 7s. So, right away, this DPM, you see that it's kind of awful. So, if you're wondering, the tanks that I'm comparing it to, I got them. These 4 are the 4 most played, and then this one, I was reading some forums, and it said that this one is very similar to the Skoda T45, so let's see if that's true. But I got these off of the Wattlife website. It has the most played tanks recently, so that's, if you're wondering where my information is from, that's where it's from. So the DPM of this tank, this is really what's really going to hold this tank back an insane amount. So you can see that this is like at least 300 damage behind all these tanks. Even these high damage tanks, or the ones that don't even really have great guns, it's really going to be holding this tank back a lot. Its HE DPM is still way behind everybody, so you're not really going to want to be shooting a lot of HE in this tank. So the damage, I mean, it's lower than all these tanks. There's a couple tanks that I didn't feature in this that you don't see as much, but those tanks might have a little bit less damage, but they probably also have more DPM. But this damage, it doesn't have the alpha that those low DPM tanks usually have, that they need to be good. So the gun is, I'm just astounded about how awful this gun is. So the pen, I mean, like I told you earlier, it has, oh yeah, let me highlight the damage of the HE shells real quick. So the IS-2 really suppresses everybody. None of the other tanks really need to shoot that much HE, especially this tank. This tank only gains 50 damage a shot with HE, and you see only 44 pen because it has an 88mm gun. So that's really, really going to be some awful HE rounds that you're really only going to want to shoot if you're fighting SPGs or something, but then also with that 9-second reload, yeah, this gun isn't looking good at all. Okay, so the 185 pen, like I told you earlier, it's more than all those Russian tier 7 heavy guns with 390 alpha, but then also those tanks have this insane DPM, almost 2,000. Well, I'm not going to say insane, but for 390 alpha, it's pretty good. So this pen really, it'll get you there. It's not going to do an insane amount of stuff. It's not going to be crazy like this tank's pen is quite good, but its pen is enough, but it's still below average. It does shoot heat, which is kind of surprising seeing as it has only an 88mm gun at tier 7. The only other tank in this comparison that shoots heat is the IS-2, which is kind of like you would know that it would shoot heat. But that's kind of also bad for the Skoda T45 because you're going to want that extra shell velocity with those APCR rounds to get in there with your goals rounds so you don't waste those goals rounds. So that might be a little bit of a struggle for the Skoda T45. It might have wanted those APCR rounds, but it does gain that extra pen. So the reload of this tank, we've already gone over this. You see all these tanks have less reload, and all of them have at least 20 more damage and better pen. So I'm not going to say any more. We know that this reload is insane. Well, insanely bad, I should say. Rate of fire, it's more than these two tanks, but also these two tanks have at least 300 alpha, and then these two tanks get at least a half a round and a half more every minute. The aim time, it's only better again than the IS-2, which has that awful dispersion and on the Russian 390 alpha gun. So no, its gun handling isn't gonna get you any better or anything like that. Same with its dispersion. It's not really gonna do anything for you. Now its turret traverse. Its turret traverse is okay. It's kind of below average again. As you see, the Tiger P, the Tiger 1, those are both also kind of have slow turret traverse. But also, these two tanks are probably the more heavily armored ones behind the T29. I almost said IS-2 right there. But, so yeah, its turret traverse not that great. Gun depression. This is like one of the things on this tank that is mediocre. It's not good, it's not bad, but it's not really going to do you anything that's going to get you above all those other tanks. It's going to be the one bright spot of this tank. No, it's not going to be like that. The T29, the AMX M445, those have those 10 degrees of gun depression that are going to really help them through the battle. But all the other tanks, they're not really going to do that much. Ammo capacity is completely fine, 64. You're not going to be running out of ammo at all, especially with this hideous rate of fire. Shell velocity, now, shell velocity 995 is pretty good. I mean, it's not slow, it's not fast, it's nothing that great, but it's nothing bad. But like I said earlier, those heat rounds, they don't have that 995 shell velocity. They have that 600 shell velocity, which I'm going to say is pretty darn slow. So you might need to be a little bit closer or give them a lot of lead if you're shooting those heat rounds. Max speed, you see it has that specific power down here, but its max speed is at least 5 below all of the other tanks, which is really going to be a struggle for this tank. If you get this tank, you're probably going to put a turbocharger on it because you're going to need that extra speed to use its specific power to up its speed a bit. And then also it has good reverse speed, 14 kilometers an hour, which is a bit more than everything else. But I mean, reverse speed isn't going to make this tank amazing. Specific power, worse than the AMX M445, but it does have a little bit better armor than that tank, as you'll see down here. But this is one of the bright spots of this tank. A bit more specific power, maybe to get into position faster. Maybe you can just go to the medium tank spot and just kind of trade shots there. Maybe you'll get some blocks. Nobody knows. You'll just have to find out your own way to play this tank. Kind of slow hull traverse. And then this is where it's good. 1,500 hit points. But then you know it's not very special when this tank also has 1,500 hit points and this 2,246 damage per minute, great pen, all that stuff. You might just want to hop into your Tiger 1, which isn't even a premium tank. Something that I might have messed up on this spreadsheet is I didn't include any other premium tanks. But also you're seeing that this tank isn't even very good compared to these tanks, which might be a little bit of a struggle because, I mean, you are going to see these tanks more often, but let me put that back. Now, those hit points will do you some good, but they're not going to save the tank too many times. Its hull armor, it's worse than the Tiger P, but it's actually better than all of the other tanks. So you might hear me saying that it's not going to do that much, which it probably won't all the time. If once it comes out on Tanks GG, I'll get on there and I'll show you how its armor is actually going to work out against some other tanks, and also if there's any more information about this tank, then I'll come out with another video about it. But its whole armor, it might be more than the other tanks, but also you see these hideous angles that are on this tank. It's just like kind of awful. And also I feel like this tank is going to be a little bit shorter than some of the other heavies, so they might be firing a bit down on you. If not, then it could actually have some decent upper Glazes plate armor, but then also remember that lower Glazes plate is really going to make you struggle. So, the turret armor. Now, this is actually quite good for this tank. The T-29, of course, has that outrageous armor, but this tank actually could, compared to some of these other tanks, have good turret armor. A lot of these other tanks, though, do have like rounded turrets, and they have that extra armor that comes from the angles. This tank is just kind of like a block tank on the front of the turret. Just like, that's probably like only 2 or 3 at the most 2 or 3 degrees of extra angles on your turret, which isn't going to be that great. And your view range, it's smack dab in the middle, 370, and then signal range, it's also kind of in the middle. So this tank, my final review on it, it's not going to be worth the gold and money or anything that you have to spend on it. If this tank looks amazing to you, please tell me why in the comments, because I am dying to know. I would suggest don't spend money on this tank, and from what I can see here, what you're going to want to do combating this tank, if you have higher rate of fire than it, you're just going to demolish it. Maybe if you have good turret armor, just kind of, it doesn't have great pen, so use your turret armor, block those shells, outmaneuver it, use its really slow rate of fire, maybe pin in 2 or 3 shells before it's done reloading, and that's how I would take down this tank. Not a very worthy foe, I would say. I'm guessing a lot of these are going to be spamming heat when they first come into the game because all the pay-to-play players are going to have them, so you might want to watch out for that. But that's about all. Thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you liked it, and we'll see you next time.